Okay, so what I want to do is just look at the benefits for you getting more engaged until you croak with your grandchildren, okay? Now, I say that respectfully because there are positive benefits to your physical, your mental, your emotional, and your spiritual life because you've been privileged to be a grandparent. Let's look at this. First of all, this proximity, this magnet, is now becoming more prevalent. Grandparents reveal that 54% of grandparents live close to their grandchildren, at least some, not all, like myself. But 72% of grandparents, and may I say grandmothers, believe being a grandparent is the single most important role in their life. And I want to amp that up because this is an incredible privilege we never thought we'd see. 65% say they are doing a better job in caring for their grandchildren than they did their own children. What do you call a mulligan? Hello. An opportunity to do it again. Keep it up. And 70% believe that being an involved grandparent brings them closer to their adult children. Interesting in Craig's story. His grandson is on his son's chest, and what does it do? It brings generational synchrony. Something comes alive when you see even another generation. Now, cash is king, Jesus is Lord. You remember those two things, all right? Grandparents have cash, plenty, more so than children and those grandchildren. This is an opportunity to resource in a way. Data says $64 billion each year on grandkids alone. Now, I love any financial planners here. I know there's a couple. So I get those dudes aside. I say, okay, man, this is a great, a 5, a 10-year, 20-year plan. That's awesome. Where's your grandmothering line item spending item in there? And they look at me like, what are you talking Swahili? Guys, we're going to have to work till we die because grandmothers just like to resource grandchildren like we never thought of. I mean, why are we paying for shoes? And I don't think we got Valentine's gifts for all of our kids. And so it goes. You care for your grandchildren maybe better than you did your children. 62%, the majority have supplied basic help, mortgage, education, daycare, healthcare, and day-to-day expenses. So don't be concerned about, am I creating a codependent relationship? Now that's a different thing that may need some insight and help. But if you've got it, it's for purpose. And that purpose, I think, begins if you don't provide for your own household. Just think about that. 45% of the independent giving to nonprofits. I love to tell pastors this. You better take care of your grandparents because they'll pay the mortgage off on the church. They'll fund stuff. And lastly, right now it's estimated that 62% of Americans' private wealth, that's in the trillions of dollars, is controlled by grandparents. Okay, I want to get now down to the foundation of grandparenting, and we'll move right through the research I have there. In reviewing responses, over 800 adults who were reflecting on their grandparent, we asked, what is one word that expresses your feelings to about your grandparent? It's just love. It's just like what Craig said. In fact, this is the cool thing. As a grandparent, and I know one right over here, you become more emotional about your grandchildren than you do your children, just to see the glow. And you know what that is? The testosterone's dropping in your system, buddy, and you become more emotionally engaged. Just like Craig, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, it is God's plan. And for all the things that you've done and accomplished, there's a time now to rest and express that emotionally. Now, this is what I love. If love is the foundation of our relationship to our grandchildren, It's like this, guys. Parenting is Old Testament. You set boundaries. You've got commandments. There are consequences. Do you know what grandfathering's like? It's like the New Testament. It's like grace. You're like, why are you so upset about this, son? That grandchild is just a joy to look at. Dad, you don't know. So this is an era, I think, where you see even in more depth because of your status. And that's why 2.7 million grandparents are taking care of grandchildren, because you can't resist God's grace. It's irresistible. And I want to say this and say it clearly. And it's interesting, Craig's brief reference about, Christopher's grandfather. Most grandparents underestimate their influence. Now, this comes from a researcher, a colleague of mine. He interviewed grandparents and their grandchildren. It was exactly his conclusion of his doctoral dissertation. You just underestimate. And you're saying, I only see him at holidays, or I can hardly get any time with him. Don't go there. What little time you have, God is going to exponentially blow that up. Because part of what you're called to now is spiritual formation in a way that you never thought of. Now, why do you think that I am with Paul, wherever that is, have been pressing this? You have more time now in your life, if you're a grandfather, than you had as far as, you may be working, I get that, but you have more time to do this. When you're rearing, ankle biters, you are running and gunning. Our spiritual formation, at least for me, has grown in a way I didn't think it would grow. I'm praying more than I ever prayed. And I'm thinking, wow, is that the stage of life? This can be the most exciting stage. You know why? The last chapters of a book are the real catch point. Ernest Hemingway wrote the last page of A Farewell to Arms 40 times till he got it right in his mind. The last pages, the epilogue, the last chapters of our life are the most important. Now we're going to dig in and say, how do we make the most of those? I never imagined this. And this is my deceased wife, and this is years ago. Now I have 15 of these, grandchildren. And they range from 17 years old down to 4 months. These are the benefits. First of all, you get involved with your grandchildren. Whether it's part-time or something, this is what happens. You are less sedentary. You may be running and chasing them, but walking, hiking, swimming, it increases the blood flow to your brain. So activity is good. Those are some of the benefits that God designed. Isn't it interesting? Even going fishing with them, taking them to play golf, whatever it may be, engagement in activities is a positive benefit to you. Secondly, the emotional benefits. Attachment is key. One thing about young grandchildren, they like to come and touch. They like to feel that old skin, the leathery, whatever, And actually, increased blood flow and touch, it increases the T cells or the fight or white blood cells. So that emotional benefit is for us. Do you see why grandmothers are so into this and why they live longer than us? Hey, let's get in the system and get going, because that's a blessing that we need to be partaking in as well. The mental benefits. Oh my gosh. How many of you have had grandchildren that had to teach you little things about this right here? Come on. They are tech savvy. Now, not only that, but engaging in what they're learning and just having that opportunity to see and to experience keeps you more cognitively aware. And this is the big one I can't say enough about. Guys, maybe this is why God has kept us alive. Maybe he wants us to grow in a way that we haven't earlier in our life. Maybe we were like Craig, addicted to something or had issues. He is extending our life for purpose, and I believe this can be the richest time in our spiritual life because we're just a short, step away from the doors of heaven. Now, I want to give you the acronym, okay? The 7 secrets, I thought, that's for younger guys. I got to keep an acronym. This is the heart of fathering. The first heart of fathering that summarizes both the research and the biblical study is sharing your heritage with your grandchildren. That's the H. The E, being an example provides inspiration. Staying married 50, 60, whatever the years are, or being an example of caring for your, in my case, dying wife, or just being an example of showing up is again what I call rooted virtue that goes into your grandchildren's mind and psyche. Okay, this is where I get in trouble. In the Journal of Marriage and Family, so this isn't in the Bible, but my publisher said, you're not going to write about that. Oh yeah, I am. Okay, in a secular journal, grandchildren who matured into adult were queried or reviewed. And they ask, describe your grandparents. Do you know what this secular journal said? My grandparent, my grandfather is like a guardian angel. Holy smoke! My grandmother has been like that visiting angel. All of those words came up. I said, I got it. I'm running with that. Now, again, we are not angels. Maybe we are, Now, as Craig said, this is the most important of the acronym, the R. Reconciling relationships within the family system is one of our roles. And I'm going to show you a short clip about how that is important. If you want to rebuild and regain, you go to your children and in a casual way say, hey, I tried to be the best I could as a dad. And you turned out great. But you know what? I want to be the best grandfather that I can possibly be. So help me because I'm a part of your team, a big part. And this reconciliation will create a pathway, as did this son, the grandson, as Craig mentioned, through his son Chris, just that connection. And then this is it, telling and teaching stories. And there are specifics related to this. So this is the heart of grandparenting. That's what's in the text there. Now this is the biblical precedent. It says, be careful, watch yourselves closely, that you do not forget what your eyes have seen or fade. Let them fade from your heart as long as you live. Teach them to your children. And this is what the whole verse says. And to their children after them. In other words, the deal isn't over just if our kids are paying the bills and, doing the things. There is a need to teach the things that you know and have seen God do. Where are we on the spectrum? Well, we're right there toward that edge. Now, this heritage is vital because researchers have noted, not just in the biblical proposition, children are a heritage from the Lord and an offspring, a reward from him. So those words right there, the heritage is inheritance, the offspring is a fruit, and the reward is the compensation that we give when we honor and respect children. Now, this is the value of heritage. If you don't know history, this is Edmund Burke. You're doomed to repeat it. This is why knowing family history, it's not Mormonistic, although they control a lot of the ancestry stuff, it can be valuable and used. Genealogists share one common research goal. It's to ensure that family heritage relationships and stories they've learned are passed on to future generations. Now, this is a key point right here. Dr. Marshall Duke at the Emory University in Atlanta found this correlation between resilience in teens and knowing your heritage. He spent 10 years studying this question: how do we build resilience in children and families? And I can tell you the answer is establishing yourself as a transgenerational person. That is learning about the history of your family. So I have adapted his Do You Know questionnaire, and this is what your grandchildren need to know about you. Describe one of the houses you remember growing up in as a child. I'm not saying that you take this and go home and do this immediately, but it's these things that build heritage that in turn builds resilience. When was the first time you experienced the presence of God in your life? Name 2 people who greatly influenced you during your teenage years. Do you think grandchildren who are teenagers would be benefited by that? When did you recognize what it meant to call Jesus your Lord? Oh my goodness. Describe your feelings and thoughts when you became a parent of their parents. What spiritual blessings do you want to give your children and grandchildren? Remembrance is the foundation of faith. So the reason that this is so key is it builds resilience as roots go down. And what are we struggling with today? I don't know if I am a male or a female. Where did I come from? How did that happen? When there is a sense of heritage, the ambiguity of heavier issues like that can sometimes be quenched in a positive, godly way. Being an example. Your example gives a powerful imprint. This is what grandchildren say. Grandparents were explicitly cited as being an example in suffering through a health crisis, in marriage, in forgiving others, how to respect myself and others, compassion, service, sacrifice, of not wasting things. Isn't that a good one? Kindness, hard work, loyalty, and an appreciation for what we have. These are mature children reflecting back on the grandparents. What's the proposition here? Follow God's example as dearly loved children, Ephesians 5:1. An example is someone to imitate and follow. Now here's a grandparenting case study. This guy's Brian Warner. He's a junior hire and, kind of awkward and so forth. This is him when he is a teenager and he's going to a Christian school. Listen closely. His grandfather exploited him, made him aware of pornography at the teenage years, and it's unclear, but this is that boy, Marilyn Manson, the rock guy. He's written a song about his grandfather. It's pretty harsh, but it's the reality. Abuse that is visited on the innocent yields fracture and chaos. Now, it's not a grandparent's responsibility to have godly grandchildren. It's the inverse. It's a grandparent's responsibility to make sure their grandchildren have godly grandparents. Okay, because you just need to cut grandchildren slack and pray. And ultimately, if you train up a child or a grandchild in the right way, ultimately, they can't resist, just as we heard the testimony from Craig. Okay, here we go. Angels in disguise. I like this. Oh, my publisher thought, you're nuts. Well, look at this. This is a challenging story. This is Shannon, mother of 3 children, living in Ohio. Sweet, sharp, but this is her father, Ron. Guess what? The kid's father is in jail. Shannon's on drugs. Ron's living in Texas, and he finds that his grandchildren are in the foster care system in Ohio. And it becomes more complex, but this is life, guys. This is Nellie. This is Ron's wife. She isn't the natural grandmother of these kids. And you what? You want to go down, get those kids, or go up to Ohio and bring them back to Texas? Man, this grandmother is a class act. Because you see the granddaughter that they reared is Simone Biles, who made all of America proud. She was reared by her grandfather and grandmother. In fact, still hasn't reconnected with her mom because of the ongoing problems and little or no contact. I tell you, if you are called, God will equip you and provide what is needed if you're called to do that. Our spiritual authority, this is what I love. Now think about it. Angels stand in the presence of God. That's us. We should be standing in the presence of God. They're often invisible or unseen. I mean, we got grandchildren on the other side of the planet or the other side of the country. You're invisible and unseen. But they're messengers and ambassadors, envoys sent from God with a message. God is giving prophetic messages. What does it say? Young men will see visions. Old men will dream dreams. And those dreams may have application in this grandfathering role. And most important, angels offer protection. I like Gabriel and the war that's coming. They are prominent in spiritual battles. Go to the book of Revelation. Come on, granddads. We have an angelic expression. I really believe that that is part of this endowment. Again, we are not, quid pro quo angels, but we have some of those attributes. Now, this is the most difficult thing in grandparenting. How do you deal with reconciliation and relationships? Because the doorway to your grandchildren's room or house goes through the doorway of your children. And if there's not reconciliation, that doorway can be shut. If there's anything I receive over and over, emails from all over the country, it's from estranged grandparents. This is a 15th century painting of the prodigal son leaving. And this is a much more modern, contemporary of a prodigal coming home. Now, when it comes to a prodigal daughter that may have had a child out of wedlock, what are we going to do? Oh, you got to go make it on your own. Now, there's a certain amount of you want to encourage self-sufficiency, but relationship trumps it all. No matter what your child or grandchild may choose as their expression in life, Billy Graham was hamstrung on Oprah. Oprah said, Dr. Graham, what do you think about gay sons or lesbian daughters? This is what he said. I got the tape. I would love them all the more. And the reason I say that, not that you're condoning that, don't give me a break, but what covers a multitude of sins? What delivers people from the pig pen? It is love. God's grace. That doesn't mean you condone stuff. It means you can love in a way that can set people free. The biblical proposition, hey, he's committed us to the ministry of message and ministry of reconciliation. That's put in place, and a reconciliation involves an exchange or a restoration of favor. And this is Some of the things, perhaps the most difficult, most needed skill in strengthening families is knowing how to reconcile and repair relationships. I've written a whole chapter on that. Stenay and Dufresne, researchers identify that solving problems and knowing how to resolve conflicts in a healthy way is a distinguishing mark of strong families. And lastly, failure to move toward resolution in generational issues will impact access to and involvement with your grandchildren. Watch this. Can you turn that on? The sound.
Beginnings. The older you get, the more rare they become. I've spent my life on this ocean, learning her ways. Hasn't been easy for me. But it won't be for you. Storms will come, skies will grow dark. Sometimes you'll get lost along the way. But you'll always have what you need to make it through. Like the psalmist once said, if I dwell in the furthest part of the sea, even there, your hands will guide me. Live by this song, as I have, and your ship will always see the beginnings of a new day.
Right now? Yeah. Okay. Time! Homework! Homework!
Endings are too often on my mind. I pray for new beginnings. And it seems that even I get another chance. A fresh start. I get to see the world through your new eyes. Because today, I'm a grandfather.
New beginnings. Isn't it great that you've lived this long to get a second chance? No matter what we may not have done or may have done, either way, we've got a God that gives us new beginnings. And we get to see the world through a new set of eyes in another way. That's the beauty of being privileged as we are. Because we're grandfathers. Now, I have a real deep desire here in that, you know what we need to raise up? Godly, praying grandfathers. We have got to not take away from grandmothers. We have to join them. We have to lead the way with the authority with which Darren challenged us earlier. If we don't, it may have not been the best that we can give with what time we have. So that reconciliation is something that's always on the table. And finally, teaching. What we teach and how we teach it. Famous, I have that painting in my home. It's the banjo player. There's something about the things that we bring to the forefront as grandparents that parents may not have time to do and may not have the desire to do certain things that we would like to do with our grandchildren. Psalm 78, it says it clear, hear my teachings, I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter hidden things from the old. We will not hide them from our children. We will tell the next generation the praiseworthy deeds of the Lord, his powers, and what his wonders have done. I'm suggesting, after looking at studies and so forth, there are three things that we uniquely can bring to the forefront. Proverbs, meaning the proverbial wisdom of Solomon that's aged, it's short, and those things, can provide long-lasting value. Parables are stories. What did Jesus do? He used these simple stories. Your life is full of parables about lessons that you've learned, and they can be captivating. And finally, as I'm being led, I don't know about you, the prayers for, with, and away for our grandchildren. Some of the teaching of godly wisdom, the 10 Commandments. One of the things I've done with my children when they have children is I bought them these stone, they're about this high and this big, 10 Commandments. I wanted my grandchildren to see them. I gave them as gifts because I know the parents are going to need that. And I remember what Lloyd Ogilvie told me. Lloyd's the retired and deceased chaplain of the U.S. Senate, pastor at Hollywood Press. He told me a story when he was chaplain that somebody came to his office, a Senate staffer, and he was referred by the senator because he'd stepped out of bounds maritally, had an affair, and Lloyd was going to counsel him. In Lloyd's office was on the wall a copy of the 10 Commandments, but it didn't say 10 Commandments. No joke. And this was some years ago. The staffer came into the chaplain's office and said, Chaplain, where did those things come from that were on your wall out there? He didn't know. He didn't know. We cannot take and assume that, in the spiritual training that, our children and grandchildren are getting the maxims and that are key to their vitality and growth. The wisdom literature in Proverbs gives contrast. That's what I like. A sluggard's like this. A diligent person is like this. I mean, it's so black and white. In this 50 shades of gray world, there's nothing better than Proverbs. The parables bring out meaning, and then the prayers are just a way to express our lives. And all three are outlined there. This is what grandchildren said. My grandparents taught me lessons about money, trusting others, not to hold grudges, values and morals, the tricks of the trade, to sew, cook fish, how to live a great life, to enjoy the simple things in life, care about others, how to garden traditions and godly wisdom. And the stories, oh, this is so good. My grandparents would tell me stories about their lives and my parents. They even captured them in a book about their life. Grandma would tell me stories in the evening to take my mind off those hot, humid Arkansas summer nights. My grandpa kept me laughing all through college about his stories. Stories were told while I sat at her feet when Grandpa put us to bed, sitting on the porch at the dinner table, and when we were outside. Often just going to their house, I would learn new things. So, the opportunity, I think, is this. We can have a fathering group in your church, or Paul has some extra copies of this. You get a grandparenting group, and it is outlined so you can discuss what are my plans as a grandfather in leading this tribe that he has blessed me with.